One or two things before we kick off. I hope you have all your tennis shoes in place, water bottles in hands, and koffiyas on your head. We would like to make one or two points. We'll be starting off with the gents in the front. So if I can just request Aunali uncle to lead the way in order for the gents to be lined up. We're walking 5 abreast. At a few verses from the Holy Quran to initiate proceedings. Thank you.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة
ورحمة الله وبركاته. Me, I will talk in Swahili because all of you are coming to Mombasa. I'm sure you are all very versed in Swahili. Mimi nataka leo kwa nafasi hii kuwakaribisha mwanzo katika Old Town. Kuna wengine najua wametoka mbali, lakini they are still from Old Town. Na pia nataka kuipongeza jamii ya Shia Itnashari kwa kazi wanafanya kwa watu wa Mombasa. Tunafanya charity nyingi Mombasa, tunapata msaada kutoka kwa Shia Itnashari, na mimi zaidi kazi ya society, kazi ya mosque, kazi ya skuli, I'm sure I'm the first person to stand by you. Other thing, kuna barua imetumwa from the community. They want to change the name from Old Moledina to Alibhai Road, which I promise you I'm working on it. I now officially kick off the war.
Brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum to all of you. I'm delighted to see a big crowd here today to walk with us on this charity walk, which is to raise funds for education. And I'll just explain to you all the format of the walk and how we'll be walking around here. We're going to begin here, starting with the Masrui graveyard, and then we'll walk down this street, which is the Barak Finawi Road, all the way past the fish market and the area, Government Square, and then onward to past the Bora Mosque to Leven House, and then finally we'll end the walk at the Itnashri Mosque. So I don't expect the walk to take too long, but along the way I will stop and I will explain some of the historical monuments and the history basically of this part of Mombasa. As you're aware, old Mombasa was limited just to this small town, and these two roads that you see here were the principal roads. That road being called Ndiaku, and this road here used to be called Vasco da Gama Street, but now it's called Barak Hinawi, after the Diwali of the coast, Sheikh Barak Hinawi, who was a Diwali from around 1940s, the Diwali of the Sultan of Zanzibar. But before we get now into the buildings, etc., I just want to say something about us. What are we all doing here and where are we all from? Because our history is intimately and intricately linked with this whole area. Our ancestors coming from the region of Gujarat and Kutch in dhows, because of they knew about the trade winds and they arrived here in the old port, and this is the places where they lived, where they worked, and where they carried out their businesses. And after that, of course, they left the old town. But as I will explain, some of the houses where they lived, etc. Okay. I'll introduce myself as well. I'm from Mombasa. I was born in Mombasa, and I studied at the Jaffery School. And at the moment, I'm a historian by profession. Well, going to be a historian, and hopefully I'm in the process of finishing my doctoral degree. My name is Zahir. Zahir, but I think most of you know me, so hopefully that's all right. My name is Zahir, right. Now, with regards to the Itnashris in Mombasa, the local Swahilis, they make a distinction. They say that they are the Koja Jamati and Koja Mskiti. And we are the Koja Mskiti. The one that basically with the Itnashris who go to the mosque, and the Koja Jamati is the ones who go to the Jamaat Khana. So that's sort of is it okay? The background, okay. Now, in terms of the first Itnashri to arrive in Mombasa, based on my research, was a man called Abdallah Datu Hirji, the ancestor of the Datu family, who arrived in Mombasa in 1882 from Zanzibar. This is almost, in a sense, Itnashri presence on the island goes back to almost 120 years. And after that, it was really in the 1890s that more merchants came. And I want to mention a very important point. The Itnashris who arrived in Mombasa were basically from different places. The older families arrived from cities where the Itnashris had already arrived. Places like Zanzibar, Bagamoyo, Lamu. Because really on the Kenyan coast, the first places the Itnashris arrived was in Lamu, not Mombasa. Because Lamu was the chief port of Kenya. And it was only in 1888, with the establishment of the Imperial British East Africa Company, that Mombasa developed as a port, and people started, merchants like Ali Dina Bisra, Nasser Birji, and many others started moving their businesses here, and we'll see some of the shops where they had their businesses and all. So you have two types of families. Other families came directly from India, from Gujarat, and arrived in Mombasa, but other families came from Lamu, from Zanzibar, and from Bagamoyo. I'll be talking more about sort of the Itnashri background here in the Old Town as we walk along, but for the moment I want to now draw your attention to some of these historical moments, these monuments, these places where the Itnashris found themselves. What's the history of Mombasa? You know, Mombasa, the Swahili word for it is Vita, which means the island of war. It has a long and bloody history, this island. And basically the rule of history here in Mombasa has been the one who controls the fort is the one who rules Mombasa. And once the Portuguese established their presence here while they were trying to find the sea route to India, ever since then there's been a battle between later the Omani Arabs and the Portuguese for control over Mombasa. And I want to draw your attention now to this plot of land here, which is called the Mazrui graveyard. Who are the Mazrui? The Mazruis were Omani Arabs, and what happened, the history of their coming to Mombasa is as follows. The people of Mombasa petitioned the Omanis for help to fight the Portuguese. And this is what begins these long wars when the Omanis come to Mombasa and try and defeat the Portuguese. And when finally the Portuguese are expelled in these long battles for the fort, the Omanis, who at that time were ruled by the Ya'ariba dynasty, they appoint the Mazruis as their governors, their wali in Arabic, in Swahili, Diwali, as their governors of Mombasa. And the Mazrui actually controlled a lot of the coastal strip, from Domeni all the way to Tanga, and they were appointed as governors in all these places. What happened was, in the 18th century, around 1730, the Ya'ariba dynasty in Oman, which fought the Portuguese, was overthrown, and a new dynasty in Oman came to power, the Al-Busaidi, and that's the dynasty that we are familiar with. Now, when this overthrow happened, the Mazrui in Mombasa declared their independence from Oman, and that's how the Mazruis came to rule Mombasa independent of Oman for over 100 years. And it was only finally when one of the Al-Busaidi sultans, Sayyid Al-Busaidi, who came to Zanzibar, he crushed the Mazrui here in Mombasa and other places. And the story of how the Mazrui was defeated is also fascinating, because they say signed a treaty with the Mazrui leader who occupied the fort to allow him to put his troops, to garrison his troops in the fort. And the troops of the Omanis were the Baluchis. And that's how the Baluchis ended up here. And eventually, through treachery, they defeated the Mazrui, and then all of the coastal strip came under the control of the Al-Busaidi and of course of the Sultans of Zanzibar. And this graveyard here is where you have many Mazrui buried, and also there's some of the Baluch leaders are also buried here, who were killed during these wars. The building you see here on my right and left facade is called, used to be called the Jubilee Hall, and it was built to commemorate the Jubilee of Queen Victoria. Initially, it was a structure that was built of makuti and mud water. In fact, most of this road that we are going to, most of the buildings were not built of stone. It was in the 1890s that buildings were built in coral and stone, and I'll point that out. But basically this area used to be called the Jubilee Hall, and it was a baraza. It functioned as a baraza. In East, you'd have the Diwalis, and prominent people from Mombasa would gather here. So this is the story of this building. And on my right here, you have the Mombasa Club. The Mombasa Club was built in 1897 by an English trader called Rex Busted. And it's called the Chini Club because it goes down, you know, it's sort of, it goes down. But when it was built, it was an extremely exclusive club. And it limited its membership to 50 people, only 50 people. And the other thing that's very interesting is that women were not allowed. Women were not allowed into the club. They were only allowed into some parts of the club. And they had a very funny rule that at 7 o'clock, the askaris and the people inside would go around with a bell. And they would ring the bell, and that was the sign for the women to leave. So finally, the women sort of got their rights, and they were able to stay on permanently. But it was an exclusive club, and then later on, after independence, it became multiracial, and people of all ethnicities were allowed inside, and sort of this was the story of the club, the Mombasa Club. And very many people have stayed here, famous people like Queen Elizabeth when she visited Mombasa, so it's a famous club. Ali's curio shop, but it used to be the first police station in Mombasa, before the police station that we now see. And it was built in 1898 as the first police station. I should point out something as well as we go along. You'll see the intricate sort of balconies that have been carved on these buildings. And as a rule of thumb, the balconies that are open were sort of in the European style. And if you go into Diaku, you'll see balconies which are closed. And that was sort of more the local style, because they would not like people looking in from downstairs. But that was sort of how they would work. And sort of they would have grills out of wood, etc. But you see much of sort of the building in very classic style with the balconies and then the door, etc. So that was the first police station. The building here is called Anil's Arcade, and this used to be the offices of a very important British firm, Smith Mackenzie. And in this firm sort of traded in many things. It was a very, very important British colonial firm. So I just wanted to mention this here. And further down this road, as you go left, there's a very important house which some of you may have seen. If you walk down here and then left, it's Sheikh Mubarak Hinawi's house. But it's a very, very old house, and I want to mention some of its history. It was built sometime in the 1880s by a fellow called Nasir bin Salim Ahmed Al-Sa'id, and it was sold in 1889 to Taria Topan. Taria Topan, if any of you have heard, was a very famous Ismaili merchant of Zanzibar. He was the Mukhi of the Jamaat Khana in Zanzibar, and at one point the master of customs to the house. And then after that, it was sold to a Parsi firm from Zanzibar called Kawaschi Dinsho. And then so it moved from Taria to Kawaschi Dinsho, and then finally it was leased to the Germans as the site of the first German consulate in Mombasa. It's, as you go, and then finally in 1948 it was sold by Kawaschi Dinsho to Sheikh Mubarak, and even today the Hinawi family, which is originally from Oman, they live there. And the door is original, and it's one of the oldest houses along our way. This house and another house that we're going to see called Leven House are the two oldest houses on this road, the Barak Hinawi road. The building you see here, this 1960s, they say this was sort of the first modern building in Old Town, but it's called Al-Kaf House. And it used to be the offices of a German firm called William Oswald and Company. They traded in hides, skin, rubber, ivory, and they moved from Zanzibar to Mombasa in 1898. The original building has been broken down, but what you see now is sort of a reconstruction. It was called Al-Kaf House. The house you see here, we identified some of the old houses where the Nasris used to live, and the family in this building here was where Haji Jaffery Academy was born in Lamu, lived here, and he was a merchant, a broker of copra, and was involved in the community and in the club. So this is one of the buildings where you had people from the community, Jaffery Academy, living here. And in fact, these buildings you see here, the three of them, were also buildings where people from the community lived. You had Haji Abdullah Jan Muhammad living in these buildings with his sons Hussein, Ahmad, Muhammad Jafar and Ghulam Bas Tommy that many people know here. And Haji Abdullah Jan Muhammad worked with a law firm at first, and after that took a part in the community as well, in the club and in the sense of the community. The building you see here in front of you is called the Dalal House. You probably can see it written up there. Dalal just means broker in Arabic, but it was the site of one of the very first banks in Mombasa. It was the National Bank of South Africa, which later became part of the Standard Bank, and it was also where the French consul lived. The building you see here with the green balcony used to be called Africa Hotel. It was one of the first hotels in Mombasa. There were two other hotels, the Grand and the Cecil. But this hotel, it had 12 rooms, and it was something of a novelty in Mombasa because it also had a sea view. This building was not there, the other one here. And so it was one of the early hotels in Mombasa, Africa Hotel. It was Haji Hussein Plaza, the one with the door here. Another member of the community lived here, and he worked as a general broker and was active again in the community. But we'll move forward and look up some more houses. We passed a building here, which I wanted to mention. This one here, it used to be the house of Sharif Khitami, which many people will sort of remember from Mombasa. But the mosque standing behind me, one of the oldest mosques in Mombasa, the Mangri Mosque. It was founded in 1570, a very old mosque. And if you look at the architectural style, this is a very distinctive style that comes from Hadramaut. That's southern Yemen. And you have this similar style in mosques in Lamu. If any of you have been to Lamu, you've seen the mosque at Shela. It has a very similar sort of cone-shaped minaret. A very distinctive style that you get in East Africa. And we have one more mosque like this in Mombasa, the Basheikh Mosque. which is on the other side, and it's near the Husseini Mosque. So the mosque was built in 1570, and the well, you have a well here, was built in 1901. And what's remarkable about the well is that it's so close to the sea, but still has sweet water. And there's an aqueduct underground that carries water from the well to the mosque. It was also a house of the Nasri, Haji Hassan Jibraj, who lived here. And he was very active in the club and opening batsmen for the Nasris, and also served as chairman of the club briefly. And also the building you see here, unfortunately it's been restored, well, rebuilt. But it's an example of the old go-downs that they had in Mombasa. Now you have the go-downs in Shimanzi, but in the old days in Old Town you had go-downs within the old fort. And then the goods would be carried directly from here into the downs and back. And now we'll be crossing the bend and into Government Square. Where you're standing now is called Government Square. And this was really, when the British established themselves in Mombasa, it was the capital of sort of British East Africa, before Nairobi. And all government offices, things to do with the government was conducted from here. The building you see on my right was the first post office. The first post office was built in 1899. And one of the reasons why it was built is very interesting because, as you know, later on in 1890, you had Indians who were brought to build the railway. The railway from Mombasa going all the way to Kampala. And they would send money back to their relatives in India. And of course letters and things like that. And so that was also an impetus for building this post office here. It also used to be the station for the tramways, because the transport system in Mombasa in those days, Mombasa was just this very small town, was a trolley system. And if you look in the fort, you can still see those trolleys. And this used to be a place where you buy your ticket and you'd sit on the trolley and they were pushed by two people and so they would carry you around to different parts of Mombasa. So this is then the old post office. And the building you see here, this building here, is a very famous building. It's now called the Summer Gallery, but it was the offices of Alibhai Visram. And most people, it was his head office. Most people have heard of Alibhai Visram. He was a merchant that came from Kerakat, and his bust, a statue of him is in Treasury Square. His son, Abdul Rasul, established the school in Mombasa that you know, the Alibhai Visram School. He was a big merchant, one of the biggest Asian merchants in East Africa, called a king without a crown, and trading in ivory, in skins, in lots of things. And this sort of was his office. I want to point out the door, because these doors, these are the Gujarati doors. If you see doors which have this square sort of shape, and with lots of squares inside, you can easily identify that as a door from Gujarat and Kutch, as opposed to the more plain design of the Omani doors. But I'll mention that as we go along. So then, this was Alibhai Visram's, and this was the old post office. This building here, you see, this was really the port. And you have the customs house inside as well. If you look carefully at the entrance, you see the head of somebody. You look above the gate, there's a head of somebody, and no one knows whose head that is. But it's been suggested that it was a Parsi chief of customs, or even maybe Queen Victoria, or that the head has been there for very long as well. We'll walk along. And the train here, you go to sort of imagine the scene back then, because they were trading in ivory, and tea and coffee and many other things, and sort of, there would be a season when you'd have all the dhows that would come to East Africa from the Gulf And a thing I want to mention, which people may not be aware, is that when our ancestors arrived, people sometimes think they came on the dhow straight from India to East Africa, but it wasn't like that. They would coast. So they would go from Kutch, the two ports in Kutch are Mandvi and Porbandar, and then they would go from coast to coast. They go to the coast of Oman, Muscat, and then Mukalla in Yemen, and then downwards to Mogadishu, and then downwards further to Lamu, and then Mombasa, and then further on to Zanzibar, etc. And so that's how they came. It was a journey that was perilous. I mean, what's incredible about these communities, especially the Khojas and the Boras and the other communities, is that they came with their families. So we have women, children. This is quite exceptional because the Hindus, when they arrived in East Africa, only the men came to trade. The women didn't come because they considered the water they call it kala pani, sort of crossing the water, dangerous. The building that's behind me is one of the most important buildings in our community's history, and I want to mention it and sort of talk about it at length because it goes right to the start of our history in Mombasa. The founder, the founder of the building was Devji Jamal. Many of you have heard of Devji Jamal. I want to mention him. He was basically one of the first people to become Itnashri in Zanzibar when he rejected the authority of the Aga Khan and became Itnashri, and that's really how we all become Itnashri, through him and others who played a very important part. But I want to mention something about his story. He's the ancestor of one of our Muhammad Jaffer of Rainbow, one of his great-grandfather. And the story is that in Zanzibar, one day, you probably know of these narrow alleyways, just like this. And Devji Jamal used to wear this white long coat, sparkling white, and with the golden turban, things like that. And as he was going through, you had Khojas who were sitting in the barazas on both sides, and they threw spittle, pan, they were chewing pan, and they threw spittle at him, and covered his white dress with pan, and he was on his way to see the consul, the British resident in Zanzibar, and the guy asked him, what on earth has happened to you? I mean, who has done this to you? And he said, oh, these are people from my own community, but they are ignorant, because the responsibility I've taken on my shoulders today, they and their grandchildren and their grandchildren will thank me for that. And from that period onwards, really, the community began sort of breaking away and becoming Itnashri and more. But now I go back to this building. Okay. The building itself was built in 1890, and it was the offices of Sharif Jaffer and Company. Devji Jamal himself established his own firm called Devji Jamal and Company, which had its offices in Zanzibar, in Lamu, and then later on in Mombasa. But when Devji died, all his assets were valued and divided between two of his sons, Sharif, and that's the ancestor of Sharif, you've heard of the Sharif Devji family, and Jafar. The family were originally in Zanzibar, and then Nazr Ali Devji, who was also a son of Devji Jamal, Jafar Devji, moved to Lamu. They moved to Lamu around the 1880s. They moved to Lamu to manage the branch of Devji Jamal's company there, and Sharif Devji, on the other hand, remained in Zanzibar. And then, I'll give you the exact date, I think it was 1887, that Nazr Ali Devji was the first person to move to Mombasa from Lamu. And then later on in 1896, Jaffer Devji moved as well and occupied this house, which was the offices of Sharif Jaffer and Company. Now, what's very interesting about this building is that Jaffer Devji had a museum on the top floor. And this museum was visited by very, very many important people, including Sir Winston Churchill, British residents, Maharajas, the Rao of Kutch, the Maharaja of Dekwad, and lots of very prominent people. In fact, the visitor's book has survived. And you have these sort of names of all the people that visited, because he was a collector. And when he traveled to Iran and Iraq, he collected some incredible pieces. Most of us have no memory of this, because most of us were born after the period of Jafar Belgi. But some of you living here might remember these very old pots that were housed here. And this is sort of really the only thing that was left of these curios. So this museum at the Old Port was very famous, very well known by many people. So after Jafar Belgi, who was a formidable man, I mean, there are lots of stories about him that I've heard in different interviews, but one of them, which is quite well known, is that they used to execute thieves and murderers, etc., at the Mackinnon market. But apparently the British had this rule, unspoken rule, that if Jafar Belgi happened to pass by, then the person would be pardoned. And so, I mean, this has apparently happened, and so he was a very formidable man, along with, you know, his friends, people like Alibhai in the Saudi office across the road. And his son, Abdullah Jaffer Belgi, was also a very important man. He was interesting because he was the only man in Mombasa who had a horse. And later he sold the horse, but it was quite unusual to have a horse in Mombasa in those days. Abdullah Jaffer Belgi served as the honorary secretary of the Indian Chamber of Commerce here in Mombasa, and he played a very important role when the British wanted to establish what's called the poll tax. They wanted to establish a tax for all non-Europeans in Kenya. And so him and some of the independence leaders from India at the time, famous lady Sarojini Naidu, and others who had come to East Africa, they sort of opposed the introduction of the poll tax, and they played a prominent role in the politics of Mombasa in that period. And after that, you had another son, the son of Abdullah Jaffer Belgi, Yusuf Abdullah Jaffer Belgi, who also lived in this house, and he ran a scent emporium, as it was called. He sold non-alcoholic perfumes from this site. But I just mentioned this because, as I said, this building has played a very important role and was really the first site, because if you think about the Bustani, which was also a shamba belonging to Devji Jamal and the first Itnashri mosque, before that was built, people would gather here. This is where they would observe, you know, the communal observances, all the rituals of the community were sort of here. And so it's an old building. It has a magnificent balcony, but it's been sort of restored as well. I mentioned the building across here as well. This is the Bora Mosque. The mosque you see standing now is a third on this site. The first mosque was built in 1901 by a very influential and prominent Bora merchant, Alibhai Moledina. For those of you who've been to Nairobi, you've heard of the Jivanji Gardens. He was a very, very important Bora merchant, one of the founders of the East African Standard, played a prominent role in the politics of Mombasa. And the old mosque, for those of you who remember, was exceptionally beautiful, because when it was built, you had craftsmen from India that came. The doors were built of teak. You had an old staircase, and sort of that was the old mosque. I'm not sure if any of you have seen that, but that was sort of the old mosque. Then you had a second one on this side, and a third one. What's important about the new mosque is it's built in the Fatimid style, because as you know, the Ismailis, the Boras, and the Aga Khan, they claim descent. The Bora leader, the Da'i, Sayyidina Tahir Saifuddin, and the others, they claim descent from the Fatimids of Cairo, and so they've modeled this architecture here, the horseshoe arch, and other architectural elements on sort of Fatimid architecture. Sort of, that's the kind of thing that you've seen here. Also in Malindi, a similar thing with the old mosque. So the only old mosque left, really, the old style, is next to the Bustani. If you want to see how the mosque looked here, have a look at the Bora Mosque next to the Bustani, and you'll get a sense of how it was built in those days. So this building here was, it's been restored and sort of rebuilt but it was also the site of, we had a Bashri living here called Abdul Rahim Massa. But this building here behind me was where Ghulam Sain Nazrali Devji lived, and I've been told from my interview that he was a very quiet and unassuming man. He used to manufacture lights, gas and lights, and was a brother-in-law of Muhammad Jaffer Sharif Devji, whose house we'll see further on. The building you see there, with I think it's 1934, is an important building. It's where Muhammad Hussain Ghulam Sain Daya from the Daya Kanji family lived. Many people will have heard of this family trading under the name of Gasmali Ghulam Sain and Brothers, KG Brothers, and he was a chairman of the Jamaat from 1974 to 1979. He played a very important role in getting all the trusts of the community registered under the name of the Jamaat, which is very hard. It was something that was, in Zanzibar, this was one of the main reasons why we had a split, even in Mombasa, because you had trusts registered under different people, different families, and then of course we wanted it all under the name of the Jamaat. So this was not a small job, but he took a keen interest in the Bilal Muslim Mission and served as a member of the committee. But the history of the family is interesting because the ancestor's name is Ganji Asani, and he migrated from India, from Jam Kambalia in 1883 with 7 sons. The journey took 40 days by down, and 4 of the sons became Ibnashri. And you sort of know all the names: Daya Kanji, the ancestor of the Daya family in our community; Panju Kanji, the ancestor of the Panju family; Devji Kanji, his son was Merali, so the Merali Devjis. So more or less you get a sense of how the 3 sons becoming Ibnashri. But this is important because beginning in the 1940s onwards, after the Second World War, many people from the community in Lamu began to come to Mombasa. And so this is a Lamu family that established itself in Mombasa. This is where they live. I think we'll move on a bit from here. In this building, this is a building where you had people from the community living. You had on the top Hasnali Nur Muhammad Jagani, who served in the community as well as a volunteer and was a court interpreter. He worked in the court and until his retirement, and in 1962 was elected chairman of the Jamaat, and was his son, Shaukat Ali Jagani, served as a trustee of the community. And at the bottom floor you had Ahmad Bandali living here. You might find me a bit fuzzy on some of these details because I don't know these people. But you probably know of them and have heard of them. And as I said, in many of these buildings you had different people of the community. My point is not to mention all of them. We can't mention all of them, that's impossible. But just to give you a sense that these were places that they lived, they worked, and sort of had their lives before they left the old town. In this small alleyway, this leads to the Ibnashri Mosque. This was the second Ibnashri Mosque built. I'll talk more about it when we get to it from the other side, but I just want to mention that you had some shops and offices belonging to people in the community here. You had the offices of, for instance, Wali Muhammad Haji Banji living, having his offices here, and also Haji Daud Haji Nasser, and you had shops here that were donated by Jivraj Katao, Jivraj Megji, which were trusts for the community and would have income to the mosque.
1951 सब सत्ते पर आग लगी और आखी लाइन बनी गई कंप्लीट लाइन आखी बनी गई पक्का मुल्ला दूसरी दुकान सुधी और પછી આ નવું મકાન બાંધવામાં આવ્યું અને નીચે સાપ કાળાનો ગોદામ હતો એમાં ફિલ્મની પટ્ટી હતી એના લીધે આગ લાગી અને આખી બિલ્ડિંગ બની ગઈ અને એક માણસ મરી ન ગયો
This building that you see here, this building belonged to Muhammad Jaffery Academy and was the site of the first Husseini forge. So some people might remember they would start out, I think, the procession from here. And Muhammad Jaffery Academy was a very important alim and zakir of Ahlul Bayt, and he wrote plenty of many books in Urdu and in Gujarati, and was the founder of the Husseini Night School. He's the maternal grandfather of late Mullah Asghar. Now I want to turn your attention to the building that you see on my right. It's a very important building. It's called Leven House at the moment, and was originally built in the 1820s. This makes it one of the oldest houses, stone houses in Mombasa. And it was later rebuilt in around 1890s. Now, why is this important? This building is very much related to sort of the very early sort of penetration of the British in East Africa. And besides the house itself, as you go further down, you have steps. Those steps are called Leven steps. Leven steps, and then you've got like a jetty, and you've got a well, also built by a fellow called Lieutenant James Emery. In the 1900s, it was acquired by Raji Banji. That's Mullah Annu's ancestor. I'll just mention something about
My father and mother also born here.
yeah, Raji Banji's story. Raji Banji was from Kutch, Maria, and arrived in Mombasa 1889. And initially, I mean, his story encapsulates really the story of many of these merchants. They came penniless to these shores and became, very wealthy, huge sort of entrepreneurs. He began selling matches and tobacco in a small shop. And around that time, in 1899, the railway had been constructed, but the railway had stopped at Savo because of you probably watched this film, the lions, the man-eaters of Savo. They were eating the guys who were building the railway. So the railhead had stopped at Savo and wasn't going forward. And really these merchants, enterprising merchants like Raji Banji, went with the train until it Savo, and then on the back of a donkey, they went forwards till they reached Nairobi.
Now, 1889 માં ઓલ્ડ ટાઉનની અંદર આ ઓલ્ડ પોર્ટ હતો અને ત્યાં હાથીદાર અને કોકડા આવતા હતા અને અહીંયા વાલજી ભાંગીની ઓફિસ હતી કે જે હાથીદારનો વેપાર કરતા હતા અને એની અંદર જે દાદરા છે ઘાસી છે એ સાગવાનની છે કે જેની અંદર કોઈ દિવસ ડૂબી ન પડે અને હજી સુધી આ ઓરિજિનલ ડોર છે કે જે 1889 ની અંદર આ ડૂબી નગાની ત્યારથી આ જ ડોર છે.
I mentioned initially when we were there that one of the first nurseries to come to Mombasa from Zanzibar, Abdullah Datu Hirji, I mean his story as well, again typifies many of the merchants who came here. He was an accountant working at the farm of Tadia Topper, and again on the back of a donkey he would go from shop to shop to the branches and do the accounts, the double entry for this farm, and that's how he arrived in these parts, to Mikindani, to Mombasa. And when he came to Mombasa, he was one of the few families that did establish themselves in the old town, but had his house in where we know today as Saba Saba. It was called Kwa Kiziwi, because he was deaf. He had problems hearing, and it's called today Ziwani, but it was at that time it was called Kwa Kiziwi. He owned all the land in that area and had one of the early houses among sort of the nurseries built here in Zanzibar, in Mombasa. In the building behind me here, you have a very long-serving teacher of the Alibhai Panju school by the name of Hamida Bai Kara, who lived here, and I think her daughter's here as well. The building that you have behind me was, you had the Marhum Aunali Moledina, who lived here. Slowly now, from here, I know it's going to be very tricky, but we're going to have to slowly walk back towards the nursery mosque. But before we do that, because we are by the sea, perhaps we can sort of just mention, I mean, these are the stairs really. You can't see them from behind, but if you were to set off the boat in Zanzibar, I don't know what Banji you have, and you all, crazy demand. Each one of you can tell me who's your person. I mean, who's the man who got onto the boat and then stepped off here. And I mean, it's a remarkable story. If one thinks about it, a journey that would take 20 days, very dangerous, and then they arrive here, not knowing the language. You know, when you go to a foreign country, you have to adapt and settle, but it's a testament to the community that's been here for over 100 years. A century is a long time by any standards. You know, things change, and people come and go. We've already seen, our grandfathers and generations past. So, this is sort of the site that you have here in Mombasa. And then you've got a group of people, families that come from Kutch, from Nadalpur, and they're all related to each other. These are the families you have, the Ramsi Katao, Jivraj Katao, Jivraj Megji, Sabit Jivraj Megji, Karim Haji Hirji, and you have a lot of these families, they were all from Nadalpur Kutch, one area, all related to each other. So basically, probably what happened is, this gentleman, I can't remember, Fazal, is also in that family, also from Nadalpur Kutch, and one man would come, and then he would establish himself, and he would call the others, and that's how they would start coming and they would settle. And initially, the community was very small in Mombasa. The Jamaat Khana, Kuze, was established in 1888, and at that time, the combined population of Ismailis and Itnashris in Mombasa was only 20, because the real sort of center in terms of where Itnashris settled and Khojas in general is Zanzibar, where our history goes back to 1820 and even earlier. For those of you who've read the account of Sir Richard Barton, who was a famous British explorer, when he reached Tabora at the shores of Lake Ujiji, when he was exploring, looking for the source of the Nile, it was two Khojas that welcomed him there. A chap called Musa, who was called by the locals Musa Mzuri, and his brother Sayan. So, it goes back quite a long time. But migration in terms of large numbers begins sort of from the 1870s onwards, and in Mombasa from 1890s especially, from Lamu and other places. But I think now we'll sort of head back.
Ladies. Hi, ladies.
If you could kind enough to stop here, this is our last monument. I'll be mentioning the sites here. But the red building, which you see right at the end, with the wooden doors, that belonged, that was, at the bottom you had the offices of H. Nur Muhammad, and downstairs you had Rajab Ali Nur Muhammad and Ghulam Ali Abdullah Nur Muhammad living there. I've been told, but maybe somebody can correct me, that Karim Haji Hirji and family lived sort of here. Yeah, it was inside here. Right, and he's here, right. And this building here was the offices of Sharif Devji and Company, and Alibhai Muhammad Jaffer Sharif Devji lived here, and Muhammad Jaffer Sharif Devji, his father, when they moved from there, the site of the first Hussaini fort, they moved their offices here. And this is really where they had the first Hussaini night school. I think this was the site of it, if I'm not mistaken. This was where they had there. And you had a building here, the Bandali Kanji building. This used to be a building also owned by the community, a member of the community. Oh, sorry, Muhammad Taki Abdullah Kanji, I apologize, sorry. Muhammad Taki Abdullah Kanji. And I think inside here was Ahmad Karim. Ahmad Karim, and inside this small alleyway. But now I'll just end by talking about the mosque. As you know, there are two Itnashri mosques in Mombasa. The first mosque was established in 1899. That's what we call today the Haidari Mosque. And it's called Bustani because in Persian, Bustan means Shamba. It was a Shamba, a plantation owned by the Devji Jamal family. And the way it used to work in those days was a family would donate the land. They buy the land, and then the community would contribute funds to build a mosque or an imambara. And so if you look at our trust deeds, you've got a list of every single donor, I mean down to the last rupee that donated money to build the mosque, the Bustani there. And this mosque here, the land was bought by the Ramsi Katao, a very prominent merchant from Zanzibar that migrated to Mombasa. And then the building was built, as I said, by contributors from the community, many of them. One of them was a lady, I should mention her. We know her only as Hashim Ghulam Singh Bujwala's sister, who donated 5,000 rupees. And the building itself, the older building, what you see now is a reconstruction. It was rebuilt, I think, in the 50s or maybe 60s. So the older building was built at a cost of 13,500 rupees, which was a large sum of money at the time. And you had people from the community, Jivraj Megji and Ismail Kalyan, who went to Bombay to raise funds, and they also had funds from Zanzibar to sort of build this particular mosque. And it was called Quwwat al-Islam. That was the old name. We now call it Hussein. So, this is basically where we end our walk. I hope you've learned something and you sort of got a sense of where everyone lived and sort of how they... here you have a great grandson of Ramsi Katao with me here. So, our history is everywhere, in all these places. And I hope you've enjoyed the walk, and till next year when hopefully we'll do Diaku. So then we have some other families coming in as well.
Weighed anchor in the River Tagus and set out once more to try and turn this dream into a reality. He set off with 4 small ships and 300 men, and after many months of hardship, adverse weather and shipboard disasters, sailed round what is now known as the Cape of Good Hope and into the Indian Ocean. Slowly, he sailed up the eastern coast of this great continent of Africa, and his first port of call was at Mozambique, where his short stay was marked by a brief and bloody battle. Again, he sailed northwards, to eventually reach Mombasa, and where initially he was welcomed.
Gigantic undertaking for many years. The main structure was in evidence after 3 years, but it was some 20 years before the major work was completed,
with no quarter given. And in the beginning, all seemed to augur well for the defenders. The Yemeni Arabs did not press home their attacks. Some Portuguese reinforcements were landed by night on the seaward side of the fort, and indeed, in August, some 5 months after commencing the siege, the Yemeni commander sailed back to the Oman.
Thank you. Having stayed in Mombasa almost my entire life, it is indeed a pity that I had not witnessed such a spectacular presentation till now. On behalf of all of us, allow me to express our accolades to the actors and the organizers of this show. Before we proceed, let us welcome the Kisani MP, Hassan Ali Joho, a delegation from the Iranian Cultural Council and the Iranian Embassy, and the chairman of the Gulf Bank, Suleiman Shaba, with a loud salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين. Mgeni rasmi wa leo MP wa Kisauni Bunge Hassan Joho, Rais wa Hoja Sheikh Nasi Jamaat Alhaj Sajjad Khaki na viongozi wote wa chama mbalimbali wa education ya Mombasa, mgeni wote wa hapa leo jioni. Kwanza nimefurahi sana kuwa hapo na nimeanza leo kuzungumza na Kiswahili kufahamisha tu mimi ni mtoto wa Mombasa.
Honorable member of the Islamic the President of the World Federation, Alibhai Dr. Moledina, the Chairman of Mombasa Jamaat, Alibhai Jaffery, the convener of the journey through the golden years, Alibhai Aunali Moledina, my elders, brothers and sisters, all protocols observed. Assalamu alaikum.
I was not expecting to make a speech. I was hoping to have a nice dinner.
Next, if I can call upon Saudi MP, Honorable Hassan Ali Joe.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
The President of the World Federation, Dr. Moledina, the Chairman of the African Federation, my brothers and sisters, I will be as brief as possible. I have tasted what has been going on the table, and I must say I'm looking forward to the dinner. This is the institution that we all are looking forward to send our children there. There could be many reasons. There could be very many reasons, but one very important reason, for those who have not said it, this is one of the schools in this county of Mombasa that has the face of Islam.
Let me start with a verse from the Holy Quran, Surah Baqarah, ayat 272, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assured us, since this was a charity walk, I found an ayat related to the walk. To make them walk in the right way is not incumbent on you, but Allah guides the right whom He pleases, and whatever good you spend, it is to your own good. And do not spend but to seek Allah's pleasure, and whatever good things you spend shall be paid back to you in full, and you shall not be wrong. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I begin in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. It is a great joy for me to see so many of you here this evening gathered today at this historic Fort Jesus, sharing a common interest to help raise funds for our students. Today's grand dinner culminates the 3-day partnership celebration by the alumni students of Alibhai Panju Primary School and now the Jaffery Academy in Mombasa and its sister school, the Asadiq Islamic School in Toronto. Alibhai Panju Primary School was founded in 1951 by the visionary leaders with the support of the generous donors to provide excellent education to our community students as lifelong learners within the Jaffery Islamic values. In the last 6 decades, our school has been able to provide high standard of education to a great number of students and has been able to nurture a sense of self-worth, self-discipline, and an understanding of the rights of fellow human beings, and above all, develop a distinguished Islamic personality. Alhamdulillah, the Jaffery Academy was started in 1984 with the humble beginnings with the motto, challenging minds, realizing potential. And over the years, it has grown into a full-fledged education center and now provides education from nursery, primary, secondary to degree courses and professional studies. Recently, we received the highest award of gold accreditation by the Institute of ACCA. And requesting them to come to our next year's charity walk, which will inshallah take place on Sunday, 1st July 2012, 9th Shaban 1433. I am humbly requesting all of you to please mark this date in your calendars and make sure you will be in Mombasa to make it a grander event.